Let's testify tonight.
Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord. But you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the word of the hope I have found. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? 'Cause the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it out. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing that. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
And good morning, everybody. Hope that everybody's doing well today. I see Miss Moneypenny there in the chat. Anybody lurking and anybody that joins later, welcome. So we're going to get to Acts chapter 17 today as we cruise right on through the book of Acts. And I got to say, it's been very enjoyable so far. Hey, Aravic, good to see you. And you know, it's been a nice process. I've actually really enjoyed doing these daily Bible studies, especially when we get a rousing conversation going like we did yesterday. So hopefully that will continue for some time. So let's move right on down to the other screen. And we'll get the share set up. All right, and there we go. So Paul is continuing his evangelism. And so we're going to see him travel to a couple of different places today. So let's take a quick look. And when Paul and his companions had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, these names, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As was his custom, Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbath days, so keep in mind, that would mean that he stayed there for at least 3 weeks. On 3 Sabbath days, he reasoned with them from the scriptures. Now, I gotta say, I really like in some ways, I kind of find myself wanting to say that, like, if I was going to say a silly old saying, like, Paul is my spirit animal. Like, Paul likes to go and argue with people, reason with people, but trying to use their own, arguing with them on their own level. So you'll see, like, when Paul confronts Greeks, he cites Greek legend and Greek poetry. When Paul is in the synagogue, he reasons with the local establishment using the scriptures. Paul likes to construct logical arguments and then have actual discussion on this stuff, as opposed to just preaching, if you don't believe what I say, then God's going to come get you kind of thing. So I really do appreciate Paul's style a lot. And of course, there's a lot of Paul's argumentation and stuff, particularly scriptural-based stuff, in the epistles. Explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. This Jesus I'm proclaiming to you is the Messiah, he said. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks and quite a few prominent women. And notice, once again, it's noting prominent women as being one of the categories of people to try to be persuaded, not just the men out there that are, supposedly the only ones with any authority and power. But other Jews were jealous, so they rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace, formed a mob, and started a riot in the city. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some other believers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house. They are defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus." When they heard this, the crowd and the city officials were thrown into turmoil. They made Jason and the others post bond and let them go. So the response from people that don't like the message is anger, violence, and false accusations about the negativity of the faith. In other words, it's exactly the same as it is today. If you look around now, many people that are the people that would actually put up an argument against Christianity, it's usually not an argument based in any kind of truth. It's usually stuff like, Christians are bigots, Christians are homophobic, Christians hate women, Christians are generally bad people. And then when they run out of things to specifically tie to Christianity, they'll start tying all religion together and start saying, well, you see, religion is the reason that we have suicide bombers, or religion is the reason we have war all over the world, or religion is the cause of all these problems, and as if Christianity is responsible for all religion. You know, I can't speak for the ideologies that support things like Islam or Hinduism or any other faith. I can only speak with any level of authority about what a Christian should say, do, and how they should behave. And it's not in the way that most people accuse. But then what people will do is they'll take the worst possible example, something like, say, the Westboro Baptist Church or something, and try to normalize that to say that that's what Christianity is, when it clearly isn't. Very few Christians out there are willing to even, if they know who the Westboro Baptist Church is, they're very, very unwilling to entertain the idea that those are genuine Christians. Anyway. In Berea, as soon as it was night, the believers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea. On arriving there, they went to the Jewish synagogue. Now, Berean Jews were made of noble character, a more noble character than those in Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. Now, this is a very key passage here that a lot of people don't emphasize, but I think should. The Bereans, what made them noble was not just that they received the good news with eagerness, but that they examined the scriptures to verify Paul's argumentation. So rather than react to Paul with negativity and hate and violence even, they reacted to Paul by saying, okay, let's investigate his argument, see if it holds any water. And honestly, that's how everybody should react to an argument put against them, is investigate whether or not there's any truth to that argument. Because if there is truth to the argument, if, for example, someone says, oh, Christians, you're a bunch of bigots, and so I need to stop and say, well, wait a minute, am I inherently a bigot because of my faith in Christ? And, can I offer a reasonable defense against that? As opposed to, just yelling, because that doesn't do anything. Anyway, as a result, many of them believed, as did a number of prominent Greek women and many Greek men. So once again, the prominent Greek women are included as very, very important here. But when the Jews in Thessalonica learned that Paul was preaching the word of God at Berea, some of them went there too, agitating the crowds and stirring them up. The believers immediately sent Paul to the coast, but Silas and Timothy stayed at Berea. Those who escorted Paul brought him to Athens and left with instructions for Silas and Timothy to join him as soon as possible. So the people in Thessalonica were so worked up about being challenged on their beliefs that not only did they throw out all the insults and hate speech and stuff like that at Paul, but when Paul left and went to another city, they actually followed him just to harass him. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those that happened to be there. A group of, I'm not even sure what that word is, Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, what is this babbler trying to say? Others remarked, he seems to be advocating for foreign gods. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting. You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean. All the Athenians and foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked and looked around carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with the inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poems have said, we are his offspring." So notice he's using their own. It's funny because I mentioned this earlier, but he uses he's using their own poetry as a piece of his argument. He's using the inscription on their temple as a piece of his argument. Paul likes to argue with people on their level, and which I really, really love. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed, and has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. So, what Paul's saying here is that in the past, God was, he knew that people were doing stupid things, but as long as, he was focusing in on the Jews, and he was willing to give them a pass, at least temporarily. But now it's like, no. This is a different day. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, however you say that. Also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. Wow, look, another woman. Jeez, it's like the New Testament is just full of these prominent women that that are important in the spreading of the good news. Wow. You'd almost think God wasn't the raving sexist that everybody makes him out to be. And that, of course, is the end of that chapter. I think that, and so this is, I'm a big fan. I used to not like Paul, to be honest, because I bought into lies that and even I would say misinterpretations of his writings, suggesting that Paul, like when he talks about things like women not having authority in the church or women being silent in the church and stuff like that, and that Paul is obviously a sexist, right? Paul, it's clear that, but because I did not understand any of the cultural context at the time. And I think that is incredibly important, that we take the time to learn the context of the writing within the passage it's written, within the book it's written, within the Bible as a whole, and also extremely important, the cultural context of the day, because there are, some of the letters of Paul are written to churches that were having very specific problems, and he was giving solutions for those specific problems. And we have to use discernment to understand that not everything, it's just when Paul is telling the women to be silent, it's not because all women should always be silent all the time. He's saying that, this church had a problem with the women causing problems. So he says, okay, so tell the women you need to shut up. And, it's you really have to be able to tell the difference. If you can't tell the difference, then you should stay away from the epistles. Youngster says, women are just like a bus. One leaves, you can catch another. That's what the Bible verses is telling you. No, youngster, that doesn't even make sense. But I'm sure that's supposed to be a joke, but I don't get it. Anyway, so questions, comments. I know I'm a little earlier than usual, so we got a smaller crowd than usual, but that's because in approximately 45 minutes, the wife and I have to leave because we're going to go see the new Bad Boys movie. But any comments, any ideas, thoughts, or should I just wrap it up quickly? I'll give you guys a minute. I can't whistle very well. I wish I could whistle, but not one of my gifts. Anything? Wow, you guys are quiet. All right, well, I guess we will call it a day early then. Which is too bad because, like I said, I really enjoyed our conversation yesterday, but I understand it's like sometimes we get a robust conversation, other days we don't. And hey, Planet X, good to see you, buddy. You're here just in time for me to say I'm wrapping it up, unless you have something you want to add to it. That's the problem with some of the I need to be more consistent about the time. I know I've been horrible. And so Miss Moneypenny throws a bunch of hand signals and then y'all. Not sure what you're trying to say there. So it's wave the live long and prosper and devil horns, y'all. That makes no sense. And Youngster says, do you think Paul had the bite? Wait. Do you think Paul had he had the bite tongue on? Youngster, I'm trying to decipher this sentence, and I do not understand what you're trying to say. Do you think Paul had he had the bite tongue on? Do you think Paul had he had the bite tongue on? Oh, let's see. Did he had to bite the tongue on certain issues? Oh, you're like, did he have to withhold? Paul was definitely, no. Paul was the kind of guy that he said the truth. Keep in mind, he got stoned because he was willing to speak the truth. He was jailed because he was willing to speak the truth. And ultimately, he was executed in Rome because he only spoke the truth. So no, Paul never withheld. And sometimes his stuff was very offensive to modern sensibility. And you know what? Sometimes the truth is offensive to modern sensibilities. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because the truth doesn't allow them to do whatever it is that they want to do. Sometimes people want to reject the truth because they would rather live a lie. And we see that rampant in society today, right? You know, the most popular thing to talk about is things like transsexualism. But it is, I mean, look, people don't want, if you tell the truth, which is that a person who is born with with XY chromosomes is one gender and two X chromosomes is the other gender, and that there are only two genders, all of a sudden you are excommunicated. You know, all of a sudden you are this horrible person. It doesn't matter the fact that it's not only supported by common sense, but even by science. You know, it doesn't matter that it is objectively true. What matters is what makes you feel good. And so people get offended by the truth. And we need, as Christians, to be more like Paul. We need to be willing to speak the truth, but at the same time, we need to choose where, when, and how we speak the truth. Because you'll notice that Paul didn't like go out and I'm sorry if you're into this kind of thing, you know, I might offend you a little bit. Paul did not grab a milk crate, go out to the town square and start shouting, "Repent or you're going to hell." Right? Paul didn't do that. He did go to the places of discussion and have reasonable arguments with people. But the first place he usually went was the synagogue. He also went to the temple courts. That's where you're supposed to have those conversations. He didn't go out to the marketplace and do that. He didn't go and attack people in local media. He simply, you know, he went to the places of discussion, of discourse, in order to have these conversations. And he invited people to have conversations with him. And it's, you know, and like it's written, the people who were of the most noble stock were not the people that necessarily had to agree with him. It was the people who listened to what he said and then checked it out. That is so vitally important, and it's something that is so missing from modern contemporary Christianity, because in modern contemporary Christianity, we're not interested in actually listening to an argument and examining the truth value of the claim. Instead, we just want to throw some emotional reaction back at them. I don't think Orwell or Huxley's vision of the future is becoming 100% accurate. I think it's approaching aspects of both. Oh, sure. Well, like Orwell always saw the oppression or the, you know, and like when you look at doublespeak, that was a big part of 1984, is the idea of doublespeak, which is a big part of culture today. Doublespeak is the idea that you change the meaning of things and you even change history, and then you simply say, but that's how it's always been. And an example that I like to cite is the word fascism. Nobody, I mean, it's so funny. If you ask people today what fascism is, it is extraordinarily rare that I hear the correct answer. And yet, if you go back to, you know, 1980, people understood what fascism meant. And so, but then we've not only we changed the meaning of fascism, we say, oh, but that's what fascism's always meant. Tolerance. What does it mean to tolerate someone or something? And so tolerance should mean as a wonderful example, is to tolerate something is to put up with an annoyance, put up with something that you find distasteful, annoying, or uncomfortable, and you basically deal with it. You don't complain about it, or you don't you don't go through the trouble of trying to change it. And instead, now what tolerance means is to respect something, to agree with something, to endorse and affirm something. Because it's even got, like, for example, now groups that used to say, I just want tolerance. Great. So you want people to just, leave you alone even though they find you annoying. Fine. But now it's like, if somebody disagrees with you, you're being intolerant. All right. It's not that your actions anymore. Now it's thought police time. So that aspect of Orwell's ideas absolutely came true. However, Orwell always predicted that this would come from the far right, and it's actually come more from the left, although it's come from both, but more of it has come from the left than the right, which I find fascinating. Too bad we don't have a Roddenberry vision of the future becoming an accurate vision of the future. The Roddenberry vision I don't care for. The Star Trek vision of the future I like, but not the Roddenberry specific one. Because Roddenberry was extremely intolerant of religion. Roddenberry, oh man, you guys have heard me talk about Roddenberry too much, but I love Star Trek. I do not worship at the altar of Gene Roddenberry, because Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek was a boring, generic sci-fi show with an all-white cast. It wasn't until the second pilot that Star Trek began to show the inclusivity and everything that it would become famous for. But that wasn't Roddenberry's idea. The only bit of inclusivity that Roddenberry had in his show was the fact that his mistress was cast as the first officer of the ship. And yes, his mistress, Majel Barrett, was someone he was sleeping with while he was married to someone else. Did Roddenberry write Who Watches the Watchers? I don't know if he wrote that episode. I don't think he did, but I'm sure he endorsed that because that is right up his alley as far as his views on religion. Look, I understand that there are people that misunderstand the concept of religion. They think that religion is responsible for all of the world's woes. And the problem is these people are, for the most part, being fed misinformation about, the cause of various wars and stuff like that. And they just think it's always about religion. Are there religious wars in history? Absolutely. Is that the majority of warfare? No. While it's true that many warriors throughout history would proclaim, God as they charge into the battlefield, that's because these are people that are convinced that there's a good chance they're about to die, and so they want to be right with God at the moment that they do. The truth is that the overwhelming majority of warfare fought in the history of planet Earth was over resources, not over God concepts. Despite the fact that Roddenberry, who did co-write Encounter at Farpoint, had Q talking about how people were fighting over tribal god images. And it's this fundamental misunderstanding So, for example, where the Crusades fought, because the Crusades are a popular one to cite, right? Where the Crusades fought strictly because Christians hate Muslims, no. The Crusades were fought because the Muslims took over the region that we refer to as the Holy Land, Israel, and the Christians decided to do a counterattack and to take it back. That's what the Crusades were. But no, we since it happens to be Muslims against Christians, we say, oh, it's a religious war, right? If you look at currently the conflict of Hamas versus Israel, is Israel fighting Hamas because Hamas is Muslim? No, Israel's fighting Hamas because Hamas attacked Israeli citizens. Now, did Hamas attack those Israeli citizens because they were Jewish? Possibly, but these two groups have been at war for, the Hamas. Unfortunately, the Palestinians. The main thing that they've been fighting over is starting with the Western Bank and the Palestinian idea that Israel should surrender all of its land to them and that Israel should be wiped off the map. Right? Is that just because Israel is a bunch of Jews, or is it because the Palestinians just feel like they should own all the land? And I agree, Planet X, it's about power, and religion is just an excuse. For much of warfare, that is absolutely true. And so we need to be careful about just, saying that, well, since Group A is, that you could take anything, like, for example, if, let's say that for whatever reason, the United Kingdom went to war with Nigeria, right? Does that make it a race war? After all, the United Kingdom is mostly white and Nigeria is mostly black. So therefore, doesn't that mean that it must be a race war? Well, no, most people would think you're being stupid if you said that. But these are, this is the same level of argumentation, because if you have one place that's predominantly Christian and another place that's predominantly Muslim, then it must be a religious war. You got to be careful about whether or not you're talking about causation or whether you're just talking about demographics. I hope that makes sense. I'm saddened by what's been going on as far as Palestine. But I also, it's like people don't even listen when people say from the river to the sea. Most people don't even understand what that means. That's genocide. And yet people want to defend that statement like it's somehow justice to completely annihilate a people. What kind of a world do we live in? Ah, yes, and my favorite YouTube name ever, it says, there are wars of Catholics versus Protestants. That is true. But now let's take a look, because the most famous would be the Irish uprisings, right? With the Irish Republican Army and all that. And to this day, Ireland is split into two nations, Northern Ireland and Ireland, one being predominantly Catholic and the other being predominantly Protestant. However, was the war a religious war as far as and the answer, by the way, is no. It was because the Irish did not feel that the English should be occupying Ireland. Now, it ended up being divided on religious lines, but the war itself was not just a religious war. They weren't fighting because your version of God is different than my version of God. They were fighting because your people are occupying my land. And if your people happen to be Catholic and my people happen to be Protestant, that doesn't change the fact that the reason we're fighting is because your people are occupying my land. It's not because, your version of God is different than my version of God. And we have to be very clear about that. Are these wars happening because there are religious differences, or are there just happens to be religious differences among warring factions? Planet X says humans just want to oversimplify things so it's easier and lazier. Understanding the nuance would require admitting you may be wrong about something, and many people would simply rather die on a hill. I tend to agree, because we want to, it is much easier to simply say that people fight over what version of God they believe in than to look at each war as a case-by-case basis, right? Most wars are not, are there tensions between people over God belief? Sure. But a lot of those tensions come from the fact that we propagate these ideas that people go to war over it. Now, you could argue for example, let's look at the 9/11 terrorists. Now, the 9/11 terrorists were radicalized by a group of Muslims and tricked into believing that somehow it was the command of God for them to attack the great Satan in the United States, and they ended up doing some horrific acts, right? Does that mean, and legitimate question here, and I would ask anybody to answer it, does that mean that the subsequent wars that were fought, be they the second war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan, does that make those religious wars? They were sparked by a small group of religious extremists. But did the United States go into war with them because of their religion, or because we were attacked? Yuckster says one of the stupidest wars was that the Princess of Spain was planning on marrying that Prince of England. She died during the trip because of bubonic plague. The Spanish declared war on the British. I don't know what war specifically you're referring to there, Yuckster, because I'm not a brilliant historian. But you know what? That wouldn't surprise me if that was 100% true. But if, and England is, is Anglican Church, Spain is Catholic, so therefore a religious war, right? Must be a religious war. Anytime there's religious differences on both sides of a conflict, we make it out that religion is the cause. This was a pillar in the argumentation of Christopher Hitchens, that religion is the cause of most worldwide conflict, and that the world would be this peaceful utopia if religion was simply eradicated. Which, the funny thing is, in and of itself, is violent speech. Is suggesting that we should. And by the way, Hitchens, I will give Hitchens credit where credit is due. He's a good orator and very good with his argumentation. But even though I disagreed with some of his premises, but I think he genuinely believed that if we just stamped out religion, if we committed genocide, if you will, against religion, then the world would be a peaceful place. Well, the interesting thing about that is that if you were to, if you were to commit genocide against everyone who disagreed with you, then everybody left would agree with you, and so you would have peace. Wow, funny how it works that way. But I think where Hitchens was wrong is that at the core, the reason the people disagree with each other is over God images. I think that is a factor at times, but I also believe, at least in the Western world, most people that I come across, most people keep their religion to themselves. Like, I am a very outspoken Christian. In that think about it. How many YouTubers out there, aside from people who just have like some kind of ministry channel or some channel associated with some church, how many YouTubers out there that talk mostly about Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff are also a outed Christian? How many are, how many talk about religion on a regular basis? Because quite frankly, and this is a problem, because people believe that religious differences lead to violence, then you have things like the YouTube algorithm will purposefully repress or oppress, I don't know what the right word there is, that type of speech. And so those channels don't get recommended as often. They don't show up in people's suggestions. Sometimes, for whatever reason, the notifications go out sluggishly. And of course, YouTube says, but we're not doing anything wrong because we're not, stopping them from, broadcasting. Well, sure, you're just stopping them from being seen. And that in and of itself, because, well, I certainly don't, I'm not sitting there going, oh, I'm being persecuted for my religious beliefs, because that's not persecution, that's just an annoyance. And while I think what Google is doing with that aspect of the algorithm is immoral, unethical, and probably illegal, I'm not going to sit there and act like it's the same thing as true religious persecution, because religious persecution is like what Paul did to Stephen earlier in the book of Acts, where they stoned the guy to death, right? That's religious persecution. Unfortunately, we're nowhere near that, at least not in the Western world, not yet. It'll come eventually, but not yet. But yeah, I think that it's too bad that people are have got these misunderstandings about religion, and so people have to be embarrassed of their religion or just not talk about it, because guess what? It's a lot easier to be successful on YouTube if, like, for example, you just, number one, don't talk about religion. Number two, don't talk about politics. And number three, just throw, a bunch of negativity at whatever is popular to throw negativity at. That's how, you want to be popular on YouTube, shut up about your religious beliefs. And if, you could become, one of the Phantom Menace kind of crowd and just, start talking about how the Acolyte is the worst thing ever made, no matter what, because of all the, the blatant messaging and stuff, because that will gain some traction on the dark side of the force, so to speak. Unfortunately, YouTube is also trying to purposely and knowingly encourage corporate channels to be more successful. Channels have a lot of financial backing. Influencers are the name of the day today, right? And the days that YouTube was just a place of discourse and fun and all that are kind of behind us, which is really sad to me. Anyway, anything else on that happy note? We still have Yuckster's comment there. All right, so we'll wrap it up there then, guys. And thank you for hanging out with me, as always. Good to see you, Planet X, Yuckster, Penny, Aravic, all you guys, thank you. I do appreciate you guys hanging out with me. And remember, you are the salt of the earth. I am the salty trekker. And, war. What is it good for?